All right, am I live? Am I live? I'm checking my phone real quick because I got my stream on my phone so I can watch myself. All right, are you going to pop up? There we are, there we are, there we are. Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm visual as well as audio, or audible. Ugh. It's 10 in the morning. Anyways, hi guys, how are you? I know it has been a very long time. I took a bit of a hiatus from YouTube and streaming. Uh, More or less, I was just getting a little burnt out, and I was also trying to focus on my projects. But I'm getting back on board with my projects, so we should be good now to at least try to start this back up again. Now, I know that in the past, whenever I did some streaming, I usually did, videos about comic books or comic book creators or writers. But today, we're going to try something a little new. Now, if you have been following my social media, you may have noticed that I've had these little figurines, these little Warhammer minis up here on my little shelf. And they've been unpainted for a very long time. So today I'm actually going to paint one of my minis. And I'm not going to focus on like trying to make him like accurate, trying to make him, or really anything. Oh, this is one, yeah. The ones with the pens kind of get a little mixed up in my, this is how new I am to the hobby. But I'm mostly just focusing on technique and actually getting the paint on the mini right now. I'm not focusing on making sure it represents any legion or anything like that. So I'm just going to make him look like Chestnut from Space King to the best of my abilities, which is going to be rather difficult considering this is my first time doing something like this. Yeah, I got his little picture in the other tab for me to use as a reference. Boy, how am I going to do that? I'll figure it out. I will figure it out. Okay. So, because I don't want you to just be watching me painting a mini, I've also got some Warhammer videos we can watch together. Yeah, so I got a couple here from, I think it's Cracked Duck, and one by Tom and Dom from Flash Gits, who are the creators of Space King. So first, I think it would be fun to watch the full 40K timeline. It's condensed. It is super condensed because there is a lot of Warhammer lore. Even just watching videos and watching shorts about Warhammer, I've realized that, oh my gosh, this is huge. But this is gonna be in 20-minute video that's going to cover the basics of Warhammer. It's not going to cover everything, but I think it would be fun to watch while we paint. All right, do we have anyone here to say hi? Does not look like it. Okay, so let us get to painting and to watching videos. I'll be stopping to make commentary. I've also got his one video on the Krieg because outside of the Night Lords, the Krieg are also an army that I would like to get into because I just love them to death. All right, so without further ado, baloop. Baloop.
Hi, friends. Warhammer is my favorite setting of all time. Duh. And I also think 40K is one of the greatest hobbies of all time. However, let's be honest, it's probably the most intimidating setting to get behind the setting of any place with a cute girl to talk to. But luckily, you have me for the Warhammer.
There we are.
But I'm just a silly little guy who will help you get your foot in the door and explain all the basics
okay.
you need to know.
So first gotta get these paints out. I have the beginner paint set, so I'm gonna have to work with what we got. This is before they changed the paint colors names from Citadel color to the Warhammer
Mostly because it is our universe, just with magic space lizards and stuff. Speaking of, a long time ago in a galaxy that's this one, magic space lizards called the Old Ones roamed the galaxy and created new species and planted the seeds of life on planets as they traveled the cosmos. Around this time, another species called the Necrontyr was beginning to gain prominence as well. But this progress was slowed due to a little affliction they had called super cancer, caused because our crappy planet's dumbass sun is a deadly laser. But
You you'd think, like, if it was that bad, why the hell didn't you just leave? Maybe they couldn't. I don't know. Again, this is a summary video, so I have no idea why they would not just leave. But yeah, if you couldn't figure out by their name, these guys are eventually going to become the Necrons.
despite their woes, eventually these dudes did create spacecraft and interstellar travel. But it sucked ass compared to the old ones. But one day they did happen upon the old ones and were amazed by their incredible tech, unrivaled power, and vast wisdom. So, naturally, Make-A-Wish Kid, the race, asked the old ones to help with their struggles. But unlike John Cena, the old ones declined their wish. Which might seem mean, but also, the old ones either couldn't help since the Necrontyr had some form of magic space cancer that was inherently tied to their species, or they didn't want to help because the Necrontyr were an evil-ass warmongering species of jerks, so giving them immortality may not have been the best idea from a species that values all life. Anyways, the Necrontyr obviously didn't like this, and thus began the War in Heaven, which is a topic in and of itself, but long story short, the Necrontyr found some star gods even older than the old ones, old ones if you will, made them bodies to talk to, allied with them since they promised the Necrontyr immortality. Yippee! Then they made the Necrontyr into soulless robot slaves.
Bit of a monkey's paw situation there, looks like.
Not yippee, but also gave them the power to actually fight the old ones without getting instantly crushed.
I'm gonna have to.
Yippee! And the Necrons and the old ones had the craziest, most insane war in the galaxy ever. I know you've seen images like this and went, oh yeah, wow, that's pretty crazy insano. Well, the war in heaven makes that look like two babies fighting over a cookie. The old ones made species to aid their war effort, most notably being the psychic Eldar and the powerful Krorks. And they seemed to be winning until some funny guys called the Enslavers started killing everyone. You see, in Warhammer, there's this little thing called the Warp, which is essentially a mirror dimension to real space. And in the time of the old ones, it was unpredictable and potentially treacherous, but like in the way the ocean is. It wasn't evil or malicious, it just had choppy waters and the occasional tsunami or something. But
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, the warp got more and more dangerous once the Chaos Gods started to be created. Because we know that with the creation, well, I know that with the creation with Slanesh, that pretty much almost killed the entire Eldar race. As far as the orcs are just happy when war's going on, so they were pretty much not affected. But as far as the warp goes, yeah, it used to be like pretty okay by like, unknown cosmic land where weird shit happens. Stuff goes. And then it got dangerous.
since the warp mirrors the galaxy's emotions and feelings, a literal galaxy spanning war of divine proportions started to make the warp actually evil and malicious, to the point that it gave birth to some evil ass monsters. So now your ocean has sea monsters, and some of those sea monsters have legs and will come into your galaxy and eat you.
Yay!
This upset allowed the Catan and the Necrons to gain the upper hand and exterminate the old ones, finally winning the War in Heaven. And
which was definitely worth it for the Necrons.
all it costed was their souls, free will, and all the pleasures of life. Then, sometime after the War in Heaven, the leader of the Necrons, Zarek the Silent King, led a rebellion and shattered the Catan into shards, which the Necrons promptly enslaved and used in their super weapons. But after defeating two god species, the Necrons were a bit tuckered out, and the old ones' new species were beginning to get scary. So, the Silent King relinquished his control of the species and initiated the Great Sleep as his last order before leaving the galaxy for some possibly literal soul searching. The Great Sleep was enacted so that the Necrons could sleep past the blossoming new species peaks, recover their strength, and then exterminate them later to reclaim the galaxy once again. So, with the Necrons sleeping, just like how there are a ton of AK 47s lying around after the USSR died, there are a bunch of Eldar laying around after the old ones died. Except these AK 47s had feelings, a lot of feelings, and also genitals. The Eldar gained dominion of the galaxy, culled the warlike Krorks, and created the greatest empire the galaxy has ever seen. Then, fast
And then proceeded to fuck themselves over.
forward approximately 60 million years, and a little species of primate evolved on a little blue planet called Earth. For this section, read this book or any similar one for relevant lore on them. But a few thousand years after that
Okay.
lore book, humanity developed space travel and began to colonize the solar system. Then the humans develop even better space travel and leaves the solar
This
system to
one.
colonize the galaxy, bringing on a new era of incredible scientific and technological progress, retroactively called the Dark Age of Technology. This was the pinnacle of humanity and was an era defined by prosperity and progress as humanity began their journey to control the stars. The most notable human inventions of this time were the AI Men of Iron, unparalleled genetic editing techniques, and warp travel. In this era, the Dark Age of Technology, humans were masters of gene editing and created subspecies, notably the navigators and squats. With the navigator gene, warp travel was invented as a form of faster than light travel. Warp travel is achieved by tearing a hole in reality to enter the warp. This is useful because in the warp there is no regular flow of time or space, so you can essentially skip across a galaxy with skilled navigators. The warp will be important again, so keep it in mind. But all good things come to an end, and across the galaxy in the Eldar Empire, having long reached their societal peak with no struggles, the aforementioned extreme feelings and genitals started to become
Pop,
an
pop,
issue
pop.
as they started a near species wide age of decadence and degeneracy. Since the Eldar have such intense emotions, their actions and powerful feelings began to negatively affect the warp. So the warp was beginning to get evil and wacko again, and part of this was a huge psychic awakening among the galaxy species, most notably humanity. At first, this was cool wizard shit, but eventually it became problematic as the Eldar continued to mess up the warp, and demonic incursions began to plague humanity, and psychic wars destroyed many great civilizations. And to make matters even worse, humanity's advanced AI Men of Iron began a revolt. Unlike our world, where AIs
Yeah, like if I remember correctly, like with Warhammer, a lot of it has like it leans more on like the cyclical nature or the cyclical theory of history. So you're going to see a lot of stuff where it's like it keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. And it's like you'd think that they would learn after, so many times of other species or other like races kind of screwing themselves over and over and over again, that they would learn, hey, maybe we should not do this. But no, they do it anyways, and that's kind of a big theme in Warhammer is we keep just making the same mistakes and screwing ourselves over.
mostly just garbage slop content, companies cheaping out, and pathetic products for losers. Seriously, who the fuck needs an AI girlfriend? Get a life, dude. AI in
Okay.
40K was actually cool robot dudes and helpful beings, but most of these men of iron eventually believed themselves to be superior to their creators, potentially due to the warp or perhaps just AI ego, and they led a cybernetic revolt. This apocalyptic war featured insano war machines on both sides and nearly annihilated humanity. But they were eventually able to defeat the AI at great cost. All AI was banned in humanity, and all the men of iron were exterminated. After this revolt and the growing warp storms, humanity was ravaged and shattered, ending their age of technology and leading to the Age of Strife. The Age of Strife was predictably defined by strife as the now mostly isolated human colonies separately developed and a number of wars began. Humanity fought demons, xenos, and other humans. Most importantly, though, on Terra, humanity broke into clans of techno barbarians led by great warlords. These techno barbarians constantly fought in a sort of clash of clans, but one warlord would rise above all and begin to unify humanity once more. A little guy known as the Emperor would finally reveal himself and his legion of genetic super soldiers known as the Thunder Warriors.
Yeah, it makes it pretty crazy with how old the Emperor is, and it's like he's not even a factor until like a good, I want to say, third of the way through Warhammer history. So this is fun.
With his Thunder Warriors and Custody legions, the Emperor would begin the Unification Wars. Meanwhile, the Elder Empire had finally reached a breaking point in which their excessive ways became so excessively excessive, it gave birth to Slanesh, the literal god of excess, and she devoured most of the Eldar, save for the Craft Worlds, Exodites, and some other small remnants. This caused even more warp chaos, since the Chaos God ranks went up by a beefy 33%. But the Emperor foresaw.
Oh yeah, he didn't cover this, but Korn, Tzeentch, and Nurgle were birthed from humans, but Slanesh is specifically an Eldar god. So, and Slanesh also either killed or completely screwed over any of the remaining Eldar gods. The one in particular that was really screwed over was Isha. She was the goddess of healing, and when Slanesh was going around causing chaos, she got, the nice way of putting it is, taken in by Nurgle, and Nurgle considers her to be his wife. But by wife, he means like she's my favorite thing to torment. And he constantly inflicts like plagues onto her just to see what would happen. And because she's the goddess of healing, she can heal pretty much any what time. But yeah, she screwed her really bad.
The birth of Slanesh, and he sought to conquer and reunite Terra under his new Imperium of Man. While his unification wars waged, he began developing his next genetic soldiers, the Space Marines. While the Marines were slightly physically inferior to the Thunder Warriors were too unstable and savage to fit the Emperor's plans. So, to provide gene seed and to lead his armies, he would make 20 Primarchs, which was actually 21 due to the magic of twins. But anyways, the Primarchs were born of warp magic and genetic sorcery to be the Emperor's most powerful warriors. However, his lab partner Erda, and technically the mother of the Primarchs, scattered the Primarchs across the galaxy because she feared the life that the Emperor would make them have. Or, there's also a cool little theory that the Emperor himself scattered the Primarchs and then blamed Erda for some big scheme of his. Luckily for him, though, even with the Primarchs scattered, the Emperor was still able to develop.
I find it so funny that so many people kind of consider Erda to be the wife of the Emperor, but it's like she was the egg donor at best for the Primarchs, and they were lab partners at best. I don't know if the Emperor actually considered anyone on his level, or outside of Malkador. Malkador is pretty much his only BFF, but I don't know if he ever like saw anyone that could potentially be at his level. And I think that was the big reason why he had that big downfall, is because he just was so arrogant. I know that's heresy, but he was an extremely arrogant character, and he's also very fascinating too.
The Astartes. But without them,
Okay.
there were some legions that developed gene seed mutations and other weird things. But
Okay,
anyways,
so how am I
about a
going to do
century after
this?
making the Space Marines, he had the Custodies and Space Marine First Legion eliminate the Thunder Warriors. Most notably out Mount Ararat, and later the Palace Coup, marking the end of the Unification Wars as he now had dominion of Terra. With the unified Terra, he began to enact his grand plan to destroy chaos. Key parts of this plan were to create an imperial version of the old one's Webway, which would eliminate the need for warp travel, and to abolish all religion, as well as making it clear that he was not a god. These would theoretically weaken the Chaos Gods enough to create a new golden age free of warp taint. And from there,
How
he
do
would
I?
launch a great crusade to
Well, he
unify
is
the
pure,
rest of
pure white.
humanity.
Okay.
He first conquered the moon and allied with the Mechanicus of Mars to supply his armies with the equipment and vehicles needed. Throughout the crusade, he slowly reunited with his sons and he recruited them to his cause. And luckily for him, most of the Primarchs gained rule of their worlds or even systems, making those freebies for the Emperor's conquest. One of the first Primarchs he came across was the 16th Primarch, Horus Lupercal. And Horus proved to be the best Primarch of all, and the Emperor's favorite. Horus was
Who totally would not come around to bite the Emperor in the butt.
not only a great warrior, but he was an extremely charismatic leader and skilled tactician. He was one of the most successful Primarchs in all of their conquest. He was wholly devoted to the Emperor, and he was one of the few Primarchs to be almost universally respected among his brothers. Due to this, the Emperor would eventually crown Horus War Master, taking the Emperor's place leading the Great Crusade so that the Emperor could focus on developing his secret webway project. And this was great. Horus was the obvious pick for War Master, and he did a great job.
There we go.
Then, sometime after that, the Primarchs and the Emperor held the Council of Nicaea, which resulted in the banning of the use of psychic powers. This will be important later, so keep it in mind. Also important is that the Primarch Lorgar wrote the Lucidio Divinitatis, which declared the Emperor a god, which, if you're paying attention, is literally against everything that the Emperor stands for, so he banned Lorgar from worshipping him. But you know what they say, worshippers gonna worship on a warship. And on the planet Acadia, Lorgar met a demon prince who convinced Lorgar to join Chaos and betray the Emperor. After doing so, he genocided the Acadians to cover his tracks, and the planet was later recolonized by loyalist Imperials. Then, unfortunately, one day, Horus would get mortally wounded by an evil-ass dagger, gifted to a rebel leader by the son of Lorgar, Erebus, everyone's favorite little guy. After being wounded, Horus made a pact with mysterious dark powers to survive his wound, officially beginning his fall. Magnus, being a powerful psyker, foresaw Horus's heresy and set out to tell the Emperor. The fastest way to alert his father was to, quote, do nothing wrong and astrally project himself to Terra against the Emperor's express orders not to use psyker powers under any circumstance whatsoever. Before even reaching the Emperor, though, Magnus would encounter a powerful psychic barrier, and in his desperation, he accepted the help of a mysterious entity to break through the barrier.
Yeah, who turned out to be Tzeentch.
But that was a trick from the god of tricks, Tzeentch, and breaking the barrier allowed a demonic incursion to destroy the Emperor's webway project, essentially dooming humanity. And for 10 years, the Custodians and Solar Forces fought the demons off in the War in the Webway. Meanwhile, the Emperor sent Leman Russ to bring Magnus back to Terra for his transgressions. And along the way, Horus would tell Russ that the Emperor had ordered him to change Leman's orders to kill Magnus instead of detaining him. People say Leman was dumb for this, but he really had no reason to doubt it, considering that Horus was War Master, and at this point, he had no reason to believe him a traitor. Plus, he hated that Magnus was so arrogant with the warp, so he happily obliged.
Yeah, again, like, thing with the Space Wolves, they really don't like psychers, like, really don't like them. So it didn't take, like, a whole lot of convincing to get Russ on board with just absolutely destroying the hell out of poor Magnus. Like, yeah, Magnus did something wrong, but it's like, holy crap, the way that the Space Wolves dealt with it, it's just like, fuck, what?
So, at the burning of Prospero, Magnus and his 1,000 sons were thoroughly beaten by the wolves, and Russ shattered Magnus, which concretely aligned Magnus with Chaos as Tzeentch pulled him and his legion into the warp. Soon after, Horus launched the Horus Heresy at Isstvan III, killing the loyalists among his legion, the Death Guard, World Eaters, and Emperor's children. Fortunately, loyalist Death Guard Nathaniel Garo was able to escape and warn Terra of the betrayal, causing a retaliation force to be sent by Dorn to intercept Horus on Isstvan V. Nearly all of the Salamanders, Raven Guard, Word Bearers, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Iron Hands were sent to the planet. After some fierce fighting, the Word Bearers, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Iron Warriors revealed that they too were traitors and ambushed the 3 Loyalist legions, killing Ferrus Manus and nearly wiping out all 3 of the legions. This was crucial to Horus's efforts as the Loyalist forces were essentially down 3 legions, and when he was War Master, Horus also diverted the best gear and resources to his allied traders. This meant that the smaller trader force was able to even the odds and gain valuable allies like half of the Mechanicus to wage war on the Imperium. So then, the Horus Heresy happened. Lots of Space Marine battles and Primarch drama, yada yada. This all culminated in the fateful Siege of Terra. As the Terran forces clashed with the Traitor Legion and Demon Hordes, the Emperor, Dorn, and Sanguinius teleported onto Horus's flagship to kill him once and for all. Here, Sanguinius was brutally killed by Horus, and the Emperor dueled his son. Horus had the power of all 4 Chaos Gods coursing through his veins, and he mortally wounded the Emperor. But the Emperor blasted Horus with a giant psychic attack that deleted his soul and earned the Imperium a Pyrrhic victory. Dorn brought the fatally wounded Emperor to Terra and put him on the Golden Throne to keep him alive, light the Astronomicon, and keep the demons at bay. The Emperor was technically alive, but he might as well have been dead as he was essentially a big psychic battery for the throne. Once Horus was vanquished, though, the Ultramarines and Dark Angels arrived in the system, and with their huge armies, they were able to beat back the remaining traitors. Then Gilliman took control of the Imperium and enacted crucial changes to prevent another heresy of large scale, came into conflict with some of his brothers, most notably Dorn, due to the said changes, but Dorn eventually relented as he didn't want a second civil war. Meanwhile, the traitors scattered and broke into warbands due to a lack of leadership and infighting. Additionally, the traitor Primarchs retreated into the warp, and the loyalist ones also went off someplace one by one, including Gilliman getting mortally wounded by a demon Fulgrim and put into stasis. And so, with the Emperor essentially dead and most of Primarchs gone, just like how George Washington's final wish was for America to not make political parties, and they honored their legendary leader by immediately ignoring that, the Imperium honored their legendary leader by immediately ignoring his wishes and creating the Imperial
Womp womp.
cult based on Lorgar's Lacidio Divinitatis and worshiping the Emperor as a god and martyr, setting the Imperium on its path of stagnation and decline.
Okay,
And then
hopefully.
after that, the Battle of the Fang, War of the Beast, Age of Apostasy, yada yada, a bunch of relatively
do I want to
unimportant
conquer
filler to
this?
get us to our favorite setting ever, Warhammer 40k. Woo! Warhammer is a lot cooler than 30k because we got aliens, baby. Whoa! I mean, 30k also had aliens, but there were non-threat side characters after the Triumph of Olenor. But anyways, by this time, the galaxy is just crazy style with endless wars going on all over the place. Along with the threat of chaos, the Orcs regained prominence, the Eldar occasionally waged wars, the Tau Empire formed, the Tyranids were attracted to the galaxy, and the Necrons finally began to wake up again.
I've heard an interesting theory about the Tyranids, is that the Tyranids are actually running from something outside of our galaxy. Like they had to flee some part of some other unknown part, and they had to come to our galaxy in order to survive. So they ravage our galaxy instead, which then begs the question, what the hell are the Tyranids running away from? But yeah, this is basically 40k in a nutshell, like extreme nutshell. There's a shit ton of lore that goes between the lines here.
The perfect setting for a war game with factions constantly fighting and doomed to a slow decline. And then, one fateful day, Abaddon finally destroyed Cadia, which had since become the second most important Imperial world after Terra, since it defended the...
Oh yeah, Abaddon was one of Horus's son. That's like the first captain, if I remember. And once Horus was killed, Abaddon took control of the Space Wolf. No, not Space Lunar Wolves. They renamed themselves the Son of Horus, and so yeah, he is the War Master of Chaos now.
Gate of the Eye of Terror from the constant chaos forces leaking out for 10,000 years. By destroying Cadia, the Eye of Terror was able to split the galaxy asunder with the Great Rift, spelling a new age of grim darkness and the Imperium's inevitable doom. Oh, except luckily the Imperiums were able to revive Rabute Gilliman from his being dead nap, and right before he died, he luckily commissioned a giant legion of Primaris Marines who are the biggest, bestest, most powerful Marines ever, and they were able to...
Well, he didn't do it alone. He had a little help there.
fight back chaos, and good old brother the Lion also woke up from his little nap a little bit later to wreck ass in Imperium Nihilus. And you can rest assured that probably all the Primarchs will come back and earn $1 billion gazillion and start Horus Heresy Part 2. Because people seem to want that for some reason. But yeah, that's the basics, and all you need to know to get into the lore of the greatest setting of all time, Warhammer 40k. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and I hope this video can help people get their foot into this amazing hobby. Anyways, thank you for watching, and big thanks to the patrons who help me make these cool videos. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your 40k timeline friends. Thanks.
Yeah, I've got the base coat down. So I'm using a white base coat because Chestnut is mostly white. So I'm gonna figure out how to get his little pantaloons to look teal. I tried mixing a few colors from the basic kit, and we'll see how this works out. Okay. So yeah, that's the basic lore.
Stephen King's On Writing is the
No, I don't want you. Okay, so let's get into the deathcore of Krieg. Again by Cracked Duck.
Hi, friends. All right, there it is. The dead corpse of Craig. He was a good dude. R.I.P. Craig. Oh, wait, oops. I read that wrong. Today, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite guard regiment, the Death Corps of Krieg. The Death Corps of Krieg are excellent warriors and are one of the best, if not the best guard regiments in the entire galaxy.
More because they'll just throw themselves into death and not really care.
They're also one of the most overrated factions in the entire galaxy. I mean, let's get into Death Corps of Krieg.
Okay.
So, basically, shovel, shovel, shovel. I love World War I. Oh boy, a tank. Fix bayonets, fella. Yeah, I mean, I just feel so bad for what my great-great-great-great-grandpa did, and I think the only way I can atone for it is to die in a random minefield, you know? Of course, I'm just kidding, but of all the factions,
let's see if I can do this.
Are perhaps one of the most squandered by dumbass Reddit memes and misinformation. But today I will show you the real lore and how they're actually much, much cooler than some suicidal shovel files. So let's get into the World War love child,
that is not very green.
The Kriegsmen. The Death Corps of Krieg originated on the lovely world of Krieg. And unlike other planets named after war or war derivatives, I'm not even joking this time around. Krieg was a beautiful and prosperous world that was an industrial powerhouse with prosperous trading. But the grand prosperity would become its undoing. The rich, corrupt autocrats of the world were like, ho, 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 much like the glorious God Emperor of mankind, I am certainly rich and powerful. Wait. And thus, the autocrats of Krieg, led by a chairman who shall not be named, began their takeover of Krieg and succession from the Imperium. The rebelling forces took over most of the planet relatively quickly, and the only real Imperial holdout was on High Farograd, thanks to the effort of the Krieg 83rd and their glorious leader, the soon-to-be legendary Colonel Yurten. Yurten and his loyalist forces were vastly outnumbered with no hopes of reinforcement since no nearby Imperial forces were available. Yurten was told to hold Krieg at all costs by any means necessary. So, basically, Imperium pulled a restaurant manager during rush hour, telling Yurten, "Oh, sorry, we can't help you here, but good luck, have a fun time." And so Yurten and the boys put up one hell of a defense, but they soon realized that this was a battle they would not win. Magos Greel, an advisor and ally to Yurten, suggested that he use some forbidden, arcane, dark agent technology hidden deep below Farograd, known as huge-ass nuclear bombs. At first, Yurten was hesitant to unleash these weapons since he knew it would almost certainly ravage his homeworld for generations to come, and his other commanders were horrified at this prospect. Some people even sent warnings to the chairman, but he said, "I'm the chairman, not the listen to warnings and quit man." And those warnings quickly went to deaf ears. However, with some goading from Greel and figuring that if the Emperor can't have Krieg, then no one can, Yurten put his plan into motion.
I wonder if there probably are, like, certain members of the Krieg who are like, dude, what the hell? There's so many other ways we could have done this. Like, even though it wouldn't be the most heroic thing to do, why not just assassinate the chairman? I mean, plenty of other civilizations have done it before, so why not?
And prepare the nuclear missiles. Missiles, eh? Kinda like rockets. While nuclear rockets certainly aren't good, you know what is? Today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money
Yay!
is one personal finance app that helps lower bills, cancel subscriptions, and manage your money better. I've personally been utilizing its budgeting features to, well, budget. It's been helpful to me budgeting my school, food, investments, bills, channel expenses, and
Yada, yada, yada.
with Rocket Money, I set a customized budget to keep track of my spendings, and the app detects when I spend in order to provide insights on how to budget better. This is especially helpful in curbing my ever-growing pile of shame. Another awesome perk to budgeting that us 40K players may not be privy to is it saves money. With premium features like automated savings.
Yeah, like the little set of Space Marines I got there and this paint set I got here, $100. And honestly, it was going into the game store and seeing the price of everything that really drove home to me what the hell was Games Workshop thinking, trying to piss off their fans, because they had fans who were willing to spend hundreds of dollars on these little guys, to spend hours painting using their specific paints, and their specific brushes, and they decided to fuck them over and tell them, hey, if you don't like what we're about to do, you're sexist and you're awful. And it's like, what the hell were you thinking? That's like terrible. That's a terrible, terrible PR move. And I spilt this shit everywhere. Back. All right.
Rocket Money has helped its customers save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. To save money and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/crackduck or click the link in the description to get started for free.
I'll clean most of it later.
Anyways, back to the less savory rockets. On the day of the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, which is basically 40K Christmas, Jordan unleashed a crap load of nuclear missiles. Nuclear bombs in the present day are pretty nutty, and Dark Ages technology is like peak nuttiness. So, needless to say, these nuclear bombs that Jordan shot were pretty damn nutty. The colonel knew that the payloads were overkill, so he had them detonate in atmosphere in hopes of making the apocalyptic damage a little less apocalyptic, which honestly didn't really help in not completely destroying the planet. The nukes bathed Krieg's atmosphere with nuclear hellfire, caused planet-wide storms, and completely annihilated the local ecosystem. The planet was plunged into a nuclear winter, and billions died from the attack. Merry Christmas, heretics. At least it wasn't coal, I guess. Also, once again, nuclear is better than coal. This nuclear strike put the Loyalists and rebels on equal footing since Jordan's forces were prepared for the strike and took refuge in underground fallout shelters. Wait, Fallout? Is this some kind of guy from Fortnite reference? So, in nuclear annihilation, the loyal...
What the hell? The puppies must be barking at each other.
...was found hope. Said hope was promptly crushed when the Imperials let Jordan know they would definitely not be sending reinforcements now that the planet was worthless. What? I thought you wanted Krieg. Well, yeah, I did, but that was before it was a nuclear trash heap. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So, once again, the Loyalists were on their own. The war progressed into a brutal war of attrition defined by its vast trench warfare. Oh my God, trenches! That means shovels! Wah! And yes, speaking of shovels, Kriegers of course use shovels as it's a useful tool, and it's feasible that they may use one as an improvised weapon once in a while. And it would be a pretty cool piece of flavoring since actual World War soldiers use shovels in trenches when bayoneted rifles prove too unwieldy. However, this does not mean that the Krieg's favorite weapon is a damn shovel, and it doesn't mean that they're gonna...
No, their last weapon of choice, it would be probably the their own bodies.
To go shovel and tank the second the opportunity arises. It's just such a dumb meme that literally has no basis in lore, and it represents why I feel the misconceptions of Krieg lessen the faction so much. It's a cool and interesting idea, parroted into stupidity, thus diminishing itself into surface level trash.
Oh my god.
But anyways, in this time, Yurden's forces were beginning to be molded into the legendary Death Corps we know and love today. They adapted to the absolutely inhospitable hellscape of Krieg, became masters of attrition warfare, and of course, created their iconic Death Riders, which proved instrumental in the war. The Death Riders arose as the Loyalists needed fast cavalry, and their mechanized options were beginning to fail in the Long War. So, the Mechanicus biologists heavily modified some horses into the freaks you see before you now. These freaks were harder, better, faster, stronger than normal horses, and had freakish claws that allowed them to tread the wasteland terrains, extra organs to survive the acrid atmosphere, and psycho injections to make them obedient, fearless, and more aggressive. So, these horses fulfilled similar roles as sentinels and are surprisingly close in durability due to their extensive enhancements. But due to the extensive enhancements, the rider has to constantly monitor their steed and inject drugs to keep it going. If you guys like ketamine, you gotta try what these studs are having. But stemming off of a biological mechanic
Yeah. There's a lot of drugs in Warhammer 40k.
is abomination, you may ask, how can an irradiated wasteland of a planet produce enough guardsmen to sustain their endless waves in the wars of attrition? Well, sometime in the hundreds of years of war, Colonel Yurden began to succumb to the nuclear devastation that he unleashed. And on the Colonel's deathbed, Magos Grill suggested that he use the arcane vitae wombs and genetic sorcery in order to ensure the planet was protected by the great warrior even past his death. However, Yurden strongly opposed this abhorrent prospect and died soon after. Unluckily for him, though, the Magos was the only one to witness his death, and he did as he pleased.
Yeah, the Mechanicus do have a track record where even if they're told no, they're just going to kind of do it anyways because they feel that they know what's best. And the king of just doing whatever the hell he wants is Belisarius Cawl. I found this out from another lore video where he literally has like a little AI, they call it abominable intelligence in the Warhammer 40k universe, but he has a little AI head of Gilliman that he will sometimes talk to try and gauge how Gilliman would like any of his wacky inventions, and the little head just usually screams at him for inventing it in the first place. And he just goes on and does what he wants anyways.
Don't use the vitae wombs.
What? What was that? I forgot to oil my mechano ears. I think I heard use the vitae wombs though. If you so wish.
So, Grill used the esoteric vitae wombs. What exactly these are is unknown, but it's implied it's either some kind of cloning machine or genetic editor to make soldiers of Yurden's caliber, or even just a simple artificial incubation chamber. I personally think that the incubator with genetic editing capabilities makes the most sense. There's some evidence for the cloning theory since they almost always wear masks, vitae wombs are taboo, and the Imperium generally doesn't like cloning. Also, some of the Krieg colonels have identified themselves as Yurden long after his death, but also it's not unheard of for soldiers to take on the name of Imperial heroes, so... And there's also compelling evidence against the cloning theory since there are men and women in the regiment, and Krieg tankers don't actually always wear their masks.
Yeah, I've heard that yes, there are female Krieg soldiers, and no, there are not female Krieg soldiers. And I think that I guess it would depend on that theory he has, where is it an artificial womb or is it a cloning process? So, because for me, it makes the most sense that the Krieg wouldn't really care about gender so long as you're willing to serve the Emperor. They are that zealot that they don't really care about that detail. That's how I see it, but if it's the cloning process, then it does make sense that they would all be male. So I guess it's like whichever theory you go for.
seems most likely to me that the vitae wombs are artificially inseminated to facilitate much faster birth rates, and somewhere along the process they're modified to prevent mutations and introduce favorable traits from notable warriors such as Yurzen. Whatever it is, though, we know is suspicious, it allows Krieg to be mass-produced, and it kind of makes them weirdos. But weird or not, it was
Kind
likely
of.
vital to the regiment's survival. So, 15 grueling generations, hundreds of miles of trenches, and billions of lives later, the Death Chaps of Krieg finally won their planet back and returned to the Imperium triumphant. But upon reporting that the planet was reclaimed, the Imperium didn't really care and just were like, okay, good for you. Make sure you pay your tithes now. And pay their tithes now they did. The Munitorum requested a single regiment from the Krieg, but they sent 20 whole regiments. Furthermore, the commanders of these regiments requested that they be sent to the absolute worst war zones in order to repent for their past sins. You see, even though the Kriegers successfully reclaimed their world and weren't even actually the ones who became traitor, they still had immense guilt over their plan's betrayal and the fact that they didn't reclaim it faster. So they created a cult of sacrifice in which the average Kriegsman saw themselves as simply a resource to achieve the Emperor's will. As such, they have little regard for their own lives as long as it furthers their goals. However, this does not mean that they are suicidal like some other irksome memes like to push. Them being willing to die does not exactly
Yeah, that is a common joke where it's like they want to be thrown into the worst battles because they want to die in the name of the emperor, and it's like yes and no. Like, yeah, they want to serve the emperor to their fullest capabilities, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to die. But then again, it does beg the question, what else do they have to live for, since they only seem to live for war? Alright. I am absolutely shit at this.
translate to them wanting to die. They want to earn atonement through death. And this means doing something that will help the cause, not just hugging a mine or kissing a berserker. Think about it like this. You have a bunch of bullets, they're expendable by nature. However, you aren't just gonna mag them into some dirt when there's heretics to blast. Krieg are the same way. They're resources, they're expendable, but they're not to be wasted. Commanders and soldiers who act wastefully and stupidly are loathed by Krieg culture as they are squandering the Emperor's resources. So, generally, the Death Corns are actually quite a tactical force that leverages their extreme numbers to win battles. However, they do tend to sometimes be a bit short-sighted, prioritizing short-term destruction at the expense of the long-term. This can needlessly elongate wars, but luckily, they're used to long, miserable wars.
Yeah, which, and also it's like, I've pointed this out before, why I find them so hilarious as a concept, that they are going against the forces of chaos. They are going against orcs. They are going against Eldar. They're going against the Tau with World War II trench tactics. It's like, buddy, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to do anything against an orc stomp.
So it's all good. Anyways, after returning to the Imperium, being cleared by the Inquisition, and battling in the worst war zones, they proved their mettle and rose to become one of the greatest regiments in the Imperium. The planet of Krieg exclusively exports guardsmen, and the near-endless guardsmen of Krieg are a valuable asset to the Imperium as a disposable hose of men to point at whatever problem they need to extinguish. Krieger training virtually starts at birth. Young Kriegers have their minds broken and reforged to have an iron resolve. Then they're rigorously trained to survive in the harshest of conditions. And if they make it past that, they get to go to the surface of Krieg as their final test. Whoopee! On the surface, they put their trains to the test in the nuclear wastelands. Here, they participated in live fire mock battles, clear minefields, and learn how to dig trenches. Oh my god! Shovels! Then, when that's all over, they get shipped out to the various war zones of the galaxy. Much like the legendary Acadian shock troopers, the Death Corps are one of the few regiments trusted to field combined arms regiments.
No!
This usually comes in the
Go
form
away.
of their famous
Stop it.
siege regiments. The siege
Behave with me.
regiments generally general tactic is to unleash unrelenting artillery bombardments upon the enemy from basilisks, medusas, and even mortars. These artillery barrages can last for months as the Krieg forces hide in fortified trenches until their enemy is crushed. Then, when their enemies are sufficiently broken, they send in endless waves of infantrymen to clean up. Their preferred transport are Gorgon assault carriers, Hades breaching drills, or just a good old-fashioned mass infantry charge. The Kriegers are most famous for their grim resolve and strong morale in battle. Seeking atonement, they're usually willing to face any of the myriad horrors of the galaxy. I say usually because, once again, unlike their memes and Reddit lore, the Krieg aren't wholly unbreakable. They're still humans at the end of the day, and they have broken in the past and retreated. Also, I could just be mistaken here, so please let me know if I missed it, but to my knowledge, the Commissars being killed by Kriegers for order and retreats thing doesn't really have any basis in lore. The only time I can remember a Krieger killing a Commissar was actually so that they could retreat because they got spooked by the overwhelming Chaos forces on Frax. However, Krieg Commissars do tend to serve a bit of a different purpose in Krieg ranks. Kriegers are usually grim weirdos, and as such, many other regiments are off-put by their presence. So, one of the main duties of Krieg Commissars is to basically convince the other Imperial forces that Kriegers aren't too weird, and to try and coordinate
No, they are very weird. Like, they are weird just like me. I think after this video, I'm gonna pause because, yeah, I'm pretty sure this looks like shit. I'm trying to match the tone of Chestnut's coloring for his arms, but I think I'm just gonna have to crack and go to the game shop and get the actual shade because I'm shit at mixing colors. But alright, maybe I could at least try and get his eyes because those are like the most tricky, and I got pretty much his helmet done.
Strategies to complement the Krieg's lack of self-preservation. Anyways, another special unit that the Krieg have on top of their Death Riders and pretty unique Commissars are their Quartermasters, who are actually kind of similar to Marine Apothecaries in that they're medics and they scour the battlefield retrieving valuables of their fallen comrades. However, to Kriegers, the Guardsman himself is not valuable. Their equipment is. So, Quartermasters go around scavenging any useful equipment from fallen Kriegers, and they usually drop a quick little prayer for those lost. They also analyze battlefield stats such as ammo usage, casualty rates, and territorial gains in order for Krieg Command to take into account. Then we have their Grenadiers, which are the Stormtrooper equivalents. Unlike the much superior Kazarkin, the Grenadiers aren't specially recruited. Rather, they're made up of veteran survivors of destroyed squads. They're given heavy carapace armor, special weapons, and they're set on suicide missions to lead charges and destroy enemy fortifications. These dudes are more similar to heavily armored infantry than spec ops like other stormtroopers, but they still kick ass and they look sick as hell. Honestly, I think they're the second coolest looking stormtroopers. After Kazarkin, of course. Then next up, we got the Death Cloak Engineers who break enemy defenses, create trenches and tunnels for subterranean battles, and act as sappers. These guys are equipped with shotguns, mines, and a variety of grenades. And these would be the real shovel men if we must have one. Except more often they're using drills and such.
I
But
suck.
I'll give them the shovels this time. They also utilize the special mole launchers, which shoot breaching torpedoes.
It looks so derpy.
Also, it seems like GW is merging the engineers with the Grenadiers, which is true is super lame as they serve different roles.
Alright,
They're
I'll
cool
get the
in their own
appropriate
way.
paint
But
and then I'll
finally,
finish your
Treasure Tree
chestnut.
stuff, their las gun is the Lucius pattern, which trades rate of fire for a more powerful shot. But we all know it's just to fit that World War vibe. Speaking of which, the death crops of Krieg are of course based on the forces of World War I, not just the German ones too. This is another meme that makes them a lot less interesting to me. The Krieg are an amalgamation of every World War force.
Oh my gosh, I saw so many comments of that on X where they're like, I don't want to dress up as a Nazi. I don't want the Dutchmen to look like Nazis. And it's like, first of all, they don't look like Nazis. Like, look at them. And second of all, like he's saying, they are an amalgamation of several different soldiers. Much like Warhammer in general, they are an amalgamation of human warfare. So, and saying that because gas mask and the wings on their helmet that makes them Nazi. It's like, you do know that both sides of World War II used gas masks, right? You do know both sides did that, right? And the wing thing, or like their symbolism, both sides did it, A. And B, this, you have to keep in mind that this setting has taken place like tens of thousands of years after World War II. So the Kriegers probably don't even know who the hell the Nazis were. They probably don't even know who the hell Hitler was. So saying that they're Nazis or Nazi inspired would not make sense in the lore at all. And besides, they don't genocide other humans, they genocide the Xenos. There's a difference.
Which is one of the coolest aspects of them. The German influence is obviously the most apparent due to their name, but their uniforms are predominantly French-looking. The helmet is a mix of French and German stylings. They have motifs of German lobster armor. The respirator looks British, mixed with other styles. And there's other stylistic things in the infantry and vehicles that allude to other World War armies. But for the most important question of all, do I hate Krieg? No, not really. In fact, I think they're one of the coolest regiments. I also think it's really cool how they perfectly embody one of the core facets of the Guard with the near infinite numbers and sacrifices. But as I've alluded to before, I just really hate the memes about them. Just like most memes just reduce a faction to the most surface level observations, and misconceptions actually make them a lot less cool than they actually are. Which also,
But the memes are fire.
admittedly, Krieg lore has been somewhat inconsistent with how they're depicted. Sometimes they're basically robot men, other times they're callous but still human. The latter being a lot more interesting to me. Not only does it highlight what makes the Guard cool to me, but it's also the tragedy of a million soldiers trying to suppress their humanity to atone for a sin they didn't commit.
Oh my gosh, there's this comic, like it's a fan comic that's called Krieger in Paradise that I absolutely find adorable. The basic gist is one Krieg guardsman is sent to this like paradise world, and he's freaking out because he's like, what the hell? I was sent here to serve the emperor, but there's no war here, so what the hell am I supposed to do? So he meets up with this like civilian farm girl, and she's like, well, how about I try and help you figure out how to serve the god emperor? And so they have like cute little adventures where she teaches him gardening, farm works. My favorite episode is the one where she's trying to teach him like wood carving, and his first attempt is shitty, and so he becomes obsessed with like getting really good at like wood carving. But there's the most recent of the comics is he has this nightmare where he's on the paradise world, but his fallen like guardsmen are telling him he's not worthy of the name of Krieg because he's not serving the emperor to his fullest abilities. And it spooks him, even though he is literally there by orders. It spooks him because he wants to be on the battlefield. He wants to atone for his countrymen's sins. And it's a fan comic, so obviously it's not canon, but I really like that additional lore where they actually get traumatized when they're not serving because they feel like they're not doing enough to atone for what their ancestors did. And that's a very interesting character work there.
I think that is so much more interesting than actual automatons. If I wanted mindless automatons, I'd play Suns, Necrons, or even technically Nids. I personally like the Guard because of the humanity and because it's humans standing up to the wackiness of 40k. But I also know different strokes for different folks, so if you like that, good for you. More power to you. But luckily, Krieg fans are masters of attrition, and they can weather the endless waves of dumb memes and misunderstandings for the faction. However, all that said, Candy is still number one. Woo! But anyways, that's the Death Corners.
All right, so I had another video lined up, but we're reaching about the hour mark, and I didn't want to go over an hour, and also I'm probably going to, I am definitely going to the game store to get the right shade for his arms, and I also want to get like green because he has the skull and wings on his breastplate there, and I want to turn that like the bright green of the tube that Chestnut uses to keep the globules in. So that's my plan for it. Like technically, yeah, I could get like a little whittler thing to get that out and insert like a tube there to make it official, but I'm not that skilled yet. I'm barely skilled enough to put on a base coat. I am not skilled enough to do anything beyond that. So, yeah, I hope you like this new format. Maybe I'll do this some other time, maybe next week. We'll see. Trying to figure out my schedule for the next month, but yeah, well, we'll see where this takes us. So, let's see if I can figure this out. Okay, badoop. Did I screw myself over? What did I do? Is it just me now? I think so. All right, well, if you liked that, let me know, and I can do more of this for you. Anyway, have a good Sunday, everyone. Bye.